Welcome to One World Stories. My name is Joanna Zell, and I'm really happy to greet a very special guest of mine, Miriam González Durántez. Miriam is the founder of Inspiring Girls, a platform for girls age 10 up to 15 to follow their dreams, to encourage them to become this powerful woman they want to be. And actually, yes, last year, Miriam started a campaign, This Little Girl Is Me, that was a huge success on Instagram, on LinkedIn, where women from different professions, different corners of the world shared their stories and encouraged young girls to follow their dreams. A very warm welcome, Miriam.
Thank you, Joanna, for the invitation. It's a pleasure being with you.
Miriam, how did your journey actually start?
How did it start? It started in Spain, in a rural environment of Spain, which is where I was born, while Spain was still under dictatorship, and where women could not do many things that we now take for granted, like owning a current account or being able to travel without the permission of the husbands and all that. And some people think that those things never ever happen in Europe, but that they did happen in Europe, and not so long ago. So I was being brought up there in a very happy childhood, but I was very aware of the fact that my mother, who was the physics and chemistry teacher of the secondary school there, had to justify constantly her right to work, and that she wasn't disrespecting my father. So I was always very aware of the gender issues. And then I started working on foreign affairs, and I was even more aware of the many violations of human rights that happened to women in many parts of the world on an almost daily basis. And I found myself almost by chance when I went to live in the UK. My husband became Deputy Prime Minister of the country, and suddenly there was all this media attention on me that I didn't want. The media attention was very much like wife being a flower pot, just what do you wear and so on, which drove me a little bit mad at the beginning. And at one point, kind of halfway through it, I thought, why am I fighting this? I should be using this for something positive. And that is when I launched Inspiring Girls, that we quickly internationalize it. And we are now working in 28 countries with girls at all different levels. We don't believe that everybody will or even may want to become CEOs and leaders. There would be a lot of different levels, but at least they need to know what women are doing already, to take some leads from them. How do you get there? What do you need? And to try to connect both generations, really. That's what we do.
Wonderful, because your campaign last year actually triggered lots of response. What was the most touching story that you encountered?
There were so many, and the campaign was called This Little Girl Is Me, and it was all about women posting pictures of how they were when they were little, and the whole purpose of that, well, is twofold, really. One is that we obsess about how can we make it easy for girls to have access to female role models, and we bring them to schools, and we also have a wonderful video hub that they can go through lots of different videos from women. They say we should bring it to social media so that they cannot miss it even if they want it, because it's there in their feed. You know? So that was the main objective of it, and also, you know, in all the work that we do with girls in all those 28 countries, we see that constantly girls do not realize that women that they look up to, they were girls like them not so long ago, and they had the same doubts and the same anxieties and so on. So that was the whole objective of that. And we had lots of very, very well-known women, you know, from the Melinda Gates and Martina Navratilovas and all that, to you know, women who are really starting at the very, very beginning of their careers. But for me, the most touching story was from a woman who was very open about, many of the stories were success stories. I thought I couldn't do it, or I was bullied when I was little, or I was different, and then I managed to overcome that. But this was a woman saying, look, I had these big dreams and it didn't work out. And I ended up working in a supermarket, and that is not what I wanted. But she went on talking about her life, and she said, Annie, it took me COVID, the COVID pandemic, to realize how important my job is. And I think that is such a good measure, such a good message to girls also, that sometimes we do not realize how important it is what we do, and that whatever it is that we end up doing, and life intervenes in all this, and luck intervenes also. It's not only effort. I think that effort is a sine qua non. But then, life takes you in lots of different directions, and wherever you are, you have to try to be the best that you can be in that particular role, and take pleasure from it.
Yeah.
Pride and pride.
And be proud of it. Yeah. Yes, actually it took me a couple of days to write this short story, and also use the hashtag "this little girl is me," because it was such an emotional process. This was the moment when I realized that actually I look back at, very, very powerful role models in my childhood, because I grew up in a household with 3 generations of power women, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mom, and no man role model. So it was also something that triggered a lot. And I said to myself, this very, very powerful women roles, sometimes they seem to be so obvious because this is the world of our obviousness. Yeah, you have just shared this situation in Spain back then, when the society was so conservative. In Poland, where I grew up, it was a very, very interesting mixture. On one hand side, the society that was extremely conservative and also driven by the Catholic religion. On the other hand side, the reality was this socialistic environment, so that it was obvious that a woman has to work. So what actually happened in my case was that I had a working mom, and she was really this power woman who, took care of the job, of the kid, everything. And my grandma, who didn't work and took care of me most of the time. And then I tried to unite these both roles in myself, and realize that it's really, really tricky to do it. So my question is actually, what kind of skills do actually women need? Because on one hand side, we've got this role model, this successful working mom, or in general, a woman. On the other hand side, this woman who is the caregiver.
Well, I have the view, which sometimes is not a very popular view, that that the skills that women need are very similar to the skills that men need, and I don't really see the world differentiating between, we need some additional ingredients. There is a magic formula there that applies to women that does not apply to men. And certainly I participate in endless discussions about women leadership, etc., etc. And I say, for me, it would be exactly the same recipe or advice I would be given to a young man is energy. You just need a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And what we all miss when we start is that failure is part of the road. You're going to encounter it no matter what. I don't know any single person that has, and let me start by saying that normally success is a different thing for different people, no? But
sure.
Nobody who considers that they have reached something that they wanted hasn't gone through some difficult moments, things that have not worked out, etc., etc. So I think that from where I look at it, is that effort, is that energy, is that being able to deal with risk. That, by the way, I think that I'm now based in the US. I think that the US is much better in instilling in the young generation that concept of risk. You need to understand risk, knowing that you are going to fail. And when I compare it to Europe, I think that we still need to do a little bit more to get our young people there. But to me, the difference between men and women is not in the recipe of what you need to put there, is that the system works against you.
Yeah.
So that is the additional thing dealing with as a woman. You have the society expects from you a series of responsibility, that I'm responsible for this or for that. And let's be clear, you know, in most of the world, I actually don't know a single country where men feel more responsible for the children and certainly for the houses than women. Well, that is a burden that we all deal with until we manage to change things. And it needs a combination of change of personal behavior, change in the families, change in the companies, but very crucially, public policies. So it's not so much on what we do, you know, on the bit that I deal with, I try to remind myself something that actually Melinda Gates says very nicely in her book, which is excellent. If any of your listeners hasn't read it, which is if you want to be seen as equal, you need to see yourself as equal. So there is a constant exercise about how do you see yourself. But let's be clear, the issues that we deal with is not in our minds, it's out there in society. And that is what we need to change, you know?
Yes, definitely. Yes. You know, one of the books that was also such a power book in my case was the book Invisible Women. And the moment when I read also about the mostly used language nowadays, and it's not Mandarin, it's not lingua franca English, it's actually emojis that was invented and introduced in Japan in the 80s. And was very popular in the 90s, was actually a male language. It took really a couple of years when, so to say, female emojis got introduced. So this is also really incredible, you know, how in the 21st century right now, we still struggle with something as obvious even in the visual world.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that concept of how it is happening in new things, I find it remarkable also when you look at how few women are at the very top of pretty much every profession. And even professions that are identified as female professions, at the very top, it tends to be men. But I'm a lawyer, so I always thought we are not very many female partners are at the very top of firms because men have been there kind of forever. So as we arrive, it's going to take a few decades to get there. But now I live in Silicon Valley. You know, most of the top jobs and actually many of the other non-jobs as well, because in tech companies tends to be around 30% or so women, are held by men. And you say, but this didn't exist 15 years ago. This is a completely new world. Yeah. So how come this happens? No? So yes, it is really, you know, it's not within every sector or within every job. It is about the other things that go on in society. So yes, totally agree.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful that you are emphasizing, you know, not only the time issue, so that it has changed within the last decades, but also that it's a cultural issue. Because when I think of, you know, the perception that you have just compared the US, Europe, or particularly Spain and UK, when I'm comparing this world of obviousness in Poland and in Germany, where I'm based right now, these are also two completely different ways of perception of the women's role in the life. So it's really very, very interesting.
Yes, I do agree with that, but I also think that there are some general things that happen everywhere. So the fact that women are primarily responsible for the children, and there has been some change there in some societies, but certainly the houses, you know, and we have seen with the COVID crisis, how we do need houses that are hygienic, that do not lead to illnesses, where there is broadly you eat nutritious food, etc., etc. I mean, we have seen the engineering in the society behind what we do on a daily basis. That is mostly done by women, right? So that is something that we need to end up addressing at some point, and that is common pretty much all around the world, from poorest countries to really wealthy countries. And then there are some things that we also see that are almost universal in terms of girls. So we have, we operate in Algeria and we operate in the US. And obviously the circumstances are very different for girls there. And we have always insisted in inspiring girls on handling each country individually. So it's Algerian women talking to Algeria girls and American women talking to American girls. So that there is none of that patronizing element of here is the West to tell you all how things need to be done. But something that really, for me, has been the biggest surprise in the campaign is to see that no matter where the girls are, no matter that the school is in a wealthy area or in a poor area, where it's rural or urban, we keep finding that lack of self-confidence is a huge issue. At that age, that pretty much everywhere girls are dropping subjects because they think that they are not for girls, they are dropping sports because they think that they are not for them. And that fear of failure that the OECD now is looking into, I think that is wonderful that finally international organizations put the spotlight on that. The fear of failure is much bigger in girls than in boys. And that is almost a universal disease, really.
Where does it come from, this feeling of not being enough?
I think that it comes from the stereotypes that we have in our society. So, and this is also something that the OECD has done some really good research on, and many others now. There are quite a few universities who have put a lot of resources into this. It is at the age of 6 that boys and girls start seeing jobs differently, as jobs for boys, for men, and jobs for women. And you don't even need to look into all that research, because if you have a 6 years old, 7 years old, just ask them, just put some pictures of what job do you think that this man or this woman do? Or can you picture whatever it is, a firefighter, and draw it here? I bet you that they will draw a man pretty much in every case. And if you say nurse, they will draw a woman. And those kids, that this happens pretty much in every country, they are not born like that, right? So from the very beginning, they don't see that. The reason they see that in 6 years is us, is the fact that we still have some drip sexism that materializes in the stereotypes, and they are part of their life. And my point is that is not something that we do on purpose. So I don't really believe that there are many people who wake up one day and they say, well, I'm going to throw in some stereotypes there in society just to make these kids miserable or whatever. No, it's just something that happens because we are used to it. And that is how we talk differently to boys and girls. And, with boys, it's like, oh yeah, try this on and be your hero. And with girls, it's be careful and don't do this, and my little princess, and so on. Little messages here or there. Don't cry as a girl, and they internalize those messages. And if we were all a little bit more attentive, it's just a matter of being a tiny bit careful about the impact of your messages. And a lot of it is about what they see in society. If they see constantly that the teachers and the nurses are always women, and what they identify, they say, you ask them sometimes, so what do you think that this man's job is? A boss. They say boss. What kind of boss? Well, they don't know, but his boss is power. No? So if they see that the men have the powerful roles, of course they are going to see society in a very biased way. But this is the easy bit to sort out. In gender, there are lots of things that are complex. For me, some of the public policy issues are complex because they require to change a lot in how society is being organized. So why, for example, fiscal policy doesn't realize that it plays a role in redressing those gender discriminations that we have seen in the house or with the children. No? Yeah. So that's a difficult discussion. Domestic violence is a very difficult discussion, but we just need a tiny bit of time and care from all of us to sort it, right?
Definitely, definitely, yes. And you know, when again I think of the campaign you started last year, I was thinking why it was so powerful, why it got so viral, why it was such a game changer. And I said, wow, the mastery was really this combination of the message, and the message was data driven, that 70% of girls actually perform much better when they have a good woman, female role model, and the singular stories. And as for this intimate singular stories, individual stories, there is, you know, just one idea that popped up, because you have addressed also your video hub, that there are this short video sequences to work with. And I know that you also apply them in the educational sector, so that girls during the classes can also watch these videos and they can relate to them. They have concrete tasks and questions to work with them. Why are these individual stories so powerful?
Because, you know, from the moment that you see somebody talking to you with authenticity, you apply that to whatever it is that you are feeling yourself. So you draw the parallel. I have to say that the campaign was primarily dedicated to girls. For me, the big surprise with this little girl campaign was, one, how many boys, you know, how many parents we got telling us, I'm getting my boys to read all this and they are loving it. And so I saw it in my own children. I have 3 boys. No? And the other thing, how much it was women reading the stories of other women. Yeah. And realizing, wow, this is not so different to me. And in particular, though in principle we were, and the campaign was an Instagram campaign, because, and we work a lot on Instagram. I personally do a lot of Instagram as well, because we think that is one of the few networks where 2 generations mix. Yeah. So you have some that are just mostly young people, some others which is mostly adults, but Instagram somehow still has retained that crossover. So that is where we did most of the stories, but we saw it taken over also in LinkedIn, where it was one of the campaigns that created most buzz. And at the beginning, I thought nobody's going to dare to do this in LinkedIn, because this is a professional environment. No? So you try to put your best look into very, you know, cold and remote and so on. And suddenly when you saw 2 or 3 women really putting their personal stories, everybody started sharing it. And I think that it was very magical, because many of us, you know, I had myself some situations of, wow, I have been working with this woman kind of 5 or 6 years, and I had no idea of what was behind her, you know, how many obstacles she had. If I had only known. And it made you think, you know, sometimes we depersonalize things so much in the working atmosphere, and even more so now that many of us are working remotely, you know, that if only we knew what goes behind, you know, we could all be, you know, much more human, and also, I'm absolutely sure, much more successful at work.
What is the reason why we don't bring our whole self to the table?
I think that it is fear. I have to say, you know, I come from a generation that we are, and I now, as I say, in Silicon Valley, there is a lot of, yes, bring your whole self to work. Yeah. And I'm
and
of the generation,
Brown and vulnerability.
You know, only half of it. And I do myself as well. And it's a difficult balance, you know, to let others see into your life, and not so much so that, you know, there is something else that becomes the center of the story rather than the contribution that you are trying to make. I have to say that I, for example, personally, I keep things at work quite straight. I have never hidden bits and pieces of my life, but I don't make my personal life the center of the story. in my professional work. And I have to tell you that sometimes it has been difficult, because whenever you have the Daily Mail just running stories about you or so, it's difficult to say, you know, this has nothing to do with the work, so let's focus on this other bit. But where I think that it is quite important, I go through the mental exercise constantly, thinking about we are all role models. So what the next generation see in us is really important. And if you decide to show yourself, and I have gone through this endless times whenever I post something on social media or you talk to young people, you really, the only requirement is that you do it with authenticity. Mm-hmm. It's just not good enough that you put together a nice picture of yourself and just tell them that everything is great and fantastic. And there are so many women, I have to say, doing that at the highest level. And there are many good reasons why not everybody may want to do that. But if you do it, do it authentically. No?
Yes, definitely. Yes. This is actually, you know, this ABC of storytelling, as I call it. And A stands really for authenticity, B for building relationships, and C for courage. Because whenever you are sharing a story, whenever you also invite people to share their stories, it requires lots of courage and also the willingness to build a relationship, to connect. Yes, stories are the glue, so to say.
Sure, and you know, everybody connects more when they see the real you. And I think that's something that was very powerful in some of those stories that were shared under This Little Girl Is Me, is that sometimes you think, look, there is no way I can expose this, right? And you take it and you agonize about it. And there is this wonderful moment that comes from, okay, now it is said, so what? So what? What, that people are going to judge you? It's like, you don't know most of those people, so why do you care how they judge you, know? So there is a feeling of liberation that comes from putting it out there, and it's like, well, this is me, you know, you better like it, because I may modify a little bit, but I'm not going to change it all.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yes, especially during the pandemic times, yeah.
Exactly.
Where actually this level of vulnerability was enhanced, I would say. Yeah, that people were more ready to open up more. And this is actually also one of the reasons I started One Word Stories, so that my guests also can share what helped them during this really, really tricky times. And this is my next question to you, Miriam. What is the word that actually supported you, and what is the story behind?
The word that I probably had most in my mind during, and not just during the pandemic, but also because everything that has happened since the pandemic is equally dismal. So we don't seem to be out of that really difficult time for the world. But the word that I always keep in my mind is small bits. You know, I have gone, like everybody else, through these general moments of hardship, and also had some personal moments of hardship. One of my sons had cancer. You know, we all have had moments of hardship, and I always think small bits. You know, if you don't think that you can make the month, just focus on the week, and if you can make the week, you focus on the day. And whenever everything blanks out and if there is no way I can go on, it's like, okay, next 5 minutes. And when you finish the next 5 minutes, you start another 5 minutes, and that is how you do it. And I think that there is part of the journey of determination that, you know, ideally you're able to see the long term or the medium term, and sometimes it's just, you know, it all closes down and it's okay, next minute, let's see how we go through that one. So that is my particular technique.
The method of tiny steps and small moments.
Exactly.
I can relate to it a lot, because actually pandemic was the time when my mom started to suffer from cancer as well. So exactly what you are saying, it's not about plans for next week, next month, it's about being happy that we can talk the next day.
Yeah, exactly. And there is always something that always amazes me in life is that even in your darkest moments, there is always something that you can look at positively. No? So I always surprise myself when you are going through a really, really tough time and you end up laughing at something. It's like there is always hope there.
Yes, yes, definitely, yes. Thank you for this hopeful conversation, Miriam. I am very, very grateful for all your stories you have shared, also your personal story right now at the end, and for spreading this hope for better life for future generations.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure. And thank you for all your help to inspiring girls and to this little girl is me. It's exactly women like you who make the difference.
What is your next step, Miriam? The next campaign, next project?
Oh, God, we are thinking about it. The team keeps pushing me to do new things. And I'm saying I have hardly recovered from the previous one. But the main thing we are trying to do is that there are quite a lot of countries that became interested in the campaign as a result of This Little Girl Is Me, and we are trying to integrate them, and it takes a lot of effort to start the campaign in new countries and to bring them to the level of what we are doing in others. We are seeing more and more demand for focus on specific issues like financial literacy, there are leadership skills, emotional intelligence skills. So the girls and the parents are pushing us very much in that direction. So we are trying to integrate all that, and we have something absolutely fantastic for the International Day of the Girl next year, which is in October. But the thing will kill me if I tell you. So
Okay,
it's going to have to be a surprise.
So I'm crossing my fingers like that, yes. So that your big surprise exceeds all the expectations. And I wish you all the best for all your projects, Miriam. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.